Thank you. Today's webinar is going to be on the state of the European heat pump market. And we're so excited for you all to join. We had a fantastic registration for this event, and I think I can understand why. It's a fantastic speaker on a really critical issue right now. So we're really excited for you to be able to join us today. For those of you not as familiar with the Building Decarbonization Coalition, we are a coalition of industry and advocacy groups working together to eliminate pollution from the built environment. We work on both policy and market solutions across the United States, really focusing on how do we electrify America's building stock. We started our work very early on with a roadmap focused on one state, on California, and out of that adopted what we thought were some critical goals if we're able to meet our carbon neutrality goals across the United States. One, we need to begin with the stopping of the expansion of the natural gas network, and we believe that should be done through building codes that restrict all new buildings to be running on only electricity. Second, for existing buildings, we need to be implementing a series of policies that make sure that we're getting on a path to full carbon neutrality of the building stock by no later than 2045. And fundamental to that is we believe that because water heaters have about a 12-year life and furnaces have about a 15-year life, that we can't be selling any more of these new gas-fired technologies after 2030 if we're hoping to meet 2045 targets. And so in order to meet those goals, we recognize that there are a series of market and policy-based goals that are going to need to be met if we're to have these goals achieved. Number one, we need to significantly increase awareness of the benefits of high efficiency electric buildings over gas-powered in heated buildings. And that's really for consumers, for installers, and policymakers. Number two, there has to be a good value proposition for customers. Customers on both the capital expenses as well as operating expenses if customers are going to be buying all electric appliances in homes. Number three, we need to make sure that building decarbonization can provide a good value proposition for the industry as well. People need to be able to make money off of this. We have not done a good job in energy efficiency on this as we have with, say, solar. And so we need to make sure that building decarbonization is a profitable market for the industries that are going to be working in it. Number four, we need to make sure that we're sending very clear signals to the supply chain so that they know what regulations are coming, when demand will start to ramp up, and what they need to be doing to be playing a significant role in this. And we need to be getting barriers of the supply chain out of the way, such as undersized electrical panels and lack of infrastructure. And lastly, we need to be aligning our policies. So we're never going to meet our clean air or climate goals if our building code, if our affordable housing standards, if our energy efficiency programs are out of alignment with our clean air and climate goals. And so we think that these are the five major goals that we as a community really need to focus on to achieve our building decarbonization goals. This webinar series that we have once a month, sometimes twice a month, is one of the ways that we at the coalition seek to achieve goal one, where we bring in some of the top speakers, thinkers, and doers within the building decarbonization space around the world to come and share what they're working on, what they're thinking about, and some advice to all of us. And so we're very excited to be welcoming Thomas today, who I'll talk about in a second. A couple upcoming webinars. On May 5th, we're going to have a fantastic webinar with the folks from HEAT in Massachusetts, talking about how to be moving from a gas-based heating system to a geogrid-based heating system, and how can we use a bunch of those stranded assets, so stranded gassets in the ground instead to be providing heating and cooling to homes. And so it's a very innovative model that I think is going to have a lot of support, particularly in some of the larger urban areas. And please join us on the 5th. And then we're going to continue our European tour on May 18th, where we're going to have presenters talk about the Dutch appliance phase out. The Netherlands are some of the farthest along on appliance phase out policy and approaches. as you'll probably hear from Thomas. And so we're going to have folks from the Netherlands giving a presentation about the policies happening there. And so you can see these events and register for them, or any of our other events at buildingdecarb.org, upcoming events. So just a couple logistics. Everyone hopefully is muted. If you're not muted, please do mute yourself. Please ask your questions via chat, and we'll ask the speaker to answer the questions at the end of the remarks, or we may call on you to ask the questions directly. This webinar is being recorded, and members of the coalition can access the recording on our website, and also have lots of other great benefits. And so if you're not yet a member of the Building Decarbonization Coalition, we have a fantastic time together with members working on policy, market solutions, and just having a good time around some heat pumps and induction stoves. And so would love to have you join the coalition, and just go to buildingdecarb.org/join in order to join the coalition. So that is our introduction. I'm going to stop sharing, and Thomas, if you could start sharing your slides, please, I will give the introduction. We are so pleased and very honored to be hearing this timely address from Thomas Nowack, the Secretary General of the European Heat Pump Association. When I look at what Thomas is taking on in Europe, and I look at all the different initiatives that he's running, it really feels like he's at another level of maturity in Europe from the heat pump market. It feels like we are but toddlers, and he's having a full midlife industry experience over in Europe. I'm just amazed by everything they're working on. The tragedy unfolding in the Ukraine right now has really brought into stark relief the need for us to be transitioning off of natural gas. And it's heartening to see that through this tragedy, we're seeing the European Union and the member states put a particular focus on heat pumps as one of the strategies that'll have to be employed in order to be able to get off of gas. And so it's going to be on all of us in the building decarbonization community on both sides of the Atlantic to make sure that we're maximizing the opportunities from heat pumps rather than just filling in the space currently provided by Russian gas with LNG from other portions of the world. And so it's a very timely address, and I can't think of a better speaker on this topic than Mr. Thomas Nowack. So Thomas, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your remarks. Please take it away.
Thank you very much, Panama, for that very, very kind introduction. I'm absolutely humbled, but it is a pleasure to speak to you from the perspective of Europe. I think looking at what you're doing, we have both to teach each other some good lessons, and we have not been as bold as saying let's electrify all buildings. I think that's something that is yet to come. We have really focused on the technology so far, and I will just run you through 15 years of hard work. And that reminds me, when I was in Montreal in 1998, a friend of mine said to me, overnight success typically takes 15 years of hard work. It has been taken us a bit longer than that, but we're pretty much there. And I think we are now in a situation where we can safely say that the political recognition of heat pumps has never been on a level as it has been, or as it is today. I want to start with a picture of an architect, a Belgian architect that now lives and likes Paris, and that's Vincent Calbeau. He has made these pictures, and I think we need a better narrative on what heat pumps can do and how a future society that will integrate heat pumps, ideally highly invisible. It doesn't matter in 20 years if it's a heat pump, it will be a comfort producing device. And this picture of Paris shows how such a future city should look like. Much more green, much more integrated architecture. And I think if we look at it, it is something that you would want to live in. So we need this type of future. Where have we started? The European Heat Pump Association represents everything that is not in the first box on the left. We do see heat pumps in white goods and electric vehicles for battery management purposes. So there is millions of these devices out there. I have once read that the market penetration of fridges is 97.8%. So everybody, and that's of course not in the United States where it's probably 200%, everybody has 2 fridges. But in the rest of the world, most people have at least 1 fridge. And that means you are acquainted with heat pump technology already. We as EHPA, we represent heat pumps in commercial and residential buildings. I took a picture with a renovated building and snow to indicate that heat pumps do work in renovation and also work in cold climates. We represent manufacturers and the value chain researchers, etc., for industrial applications and also district heating. There is a lot of discussion about the fact whether or not heat pumps are conflicting and competing with district heating. And the answer from our side is clearly that is a non-issue, because big heat pumps work in energy grids, small heat pumps work in buildings. And that's why I put the last picture here, a skyscraper, London, St. John's Wharf. What is this in your opinion? Is that a heat pump that is running an individual building, or is that a district heating moved from horizontal to vertical? And for me, the answer is very clear. You may guess. Then what have we done over the last 15 years? We have really come through a development curve of heat pump rejection. When I started this, people would say, heat pumps, what do you want here? You are not a renewable technology. Go out of this forum, you know, we don't need you. Then they said, okay, but maybe heat pumps work in geothermal. Then the discussion was, is this an energy efficiency device or renewable technology? And that is still the case today. If you talk to the IEA, they have two divisions. We talk a lot about breaking silos, but then we have organizational structures that say, no, we look at energy efficiency, and the other party says, no, we look at renewable energy. If you talk to IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Association, they cannot get a hold of heat pumps because they cannot agree ambient energy to be a renewable energy source. So the way we got into them was to say, okay, but it's a demand side flexibility technology. And they said, oh yeah, that works. So, you know, we had to be very, very flexible and innovative and ingenious to get heat pumps and to give heat pumps the recognition that they need. So then when we had overcome that problem, they said, yeah, but it only works in residential buildings. Okay, then a few dairies and a few drying processes went on heat pumps. So some people said, okay, so maybe it's also industrial, but not district heating, right? Because that is much too difficult. Another year or two went over. A new person in Euroheat and Power, the European District Heating Association, and we agreed that we actually have to play this game together and have to push renewable heating. And so we overcame that. And now at the last thing, then the discussion was, but heat pumps will blow the electric grids. Maybe you have read this book that's called Blackout, highly advisable, by Mark Ellsberg, super European focus, but it's this type of fiction that I love to read more. I'm currently reading The Ministry of the Future. And if we see that there is a heat wave in India at the moment, which is the starting point of that book, read it. I am convinced that we need to tell better stories about how the future of electric buildings, how the future with heat pumps can unfold. And I saw in your 5 points that we need to make an economic case, and absolutely, because now we hear that we can't do more heat pumps because they're simply too expensive. Of course they are not. It's just a counterfactual that is too cheap. But that is a difficult narrative to tell if then the other side brings social housing and energy challenged households into the discussion. In Europe, the benefits of heat pumps are pretty much undisputed. We wrote a small booklet on heat pumps. I put the link here, a white book, heat pumps. It aged pretty well. This is from 2018. The only thing that does not work anymore is the market numbers. I show them in a minute. And somebody said, oh, this is a shuriken of heat pumps. So if you're a heat pump ninja, this is your weapon, right? You throw it and then you can harm the other party significantly. But we have done this also in the market. Here you see market development since 1990. In 1990, 3 countries reported heat pump sales. Some of the jumps in that curve are actually adding new countries. I didn't specify that here, but from 2004 to 2005, it was not a doubling of sales. It was simply that we found, you have to say, you have to recognize, we found some markets that had never bothered reporting. I remember when I first went to Norway, the Norwegians never reported their data. And I eventually I wrote to their whole board an email saying, guys, that is impossible. You cannot be members of this association when you never report data. And out of a sudden, I had an invitation with 3 of the top guys of the Norwegian heat pumps industry. And it turns out they sold 60,000 euros, but they never told anybody about it. So, this idea that we have to talk more about what benefits we can bring, that is also very relevant. And here now we are saying we are compiling these data for a long time. Since 2010, it's about consistent in terms of markets. So we can safely say this is real growth. And we see here last year, 2021, still lacking the data of Ireland. So I imagine this is going to go up a bit more, but we see a growth of 30%. And we split it up in heating, heat pumps, air to air, and hydronic, and then sanitary hot water, because that is a very good entry-level technology. You mentioned, Panama, that your gas heaters have a lifetime of 12 years. Probably heat pump water heaters have the same, but they are really easy to put in, even next to a furnace. And in Europe, it would be next to a gas boiler or an oil boiler. And you bring immediately 15 to 20% renewables into the game, and you acquaint the installer with the new technology that they might be skeptical about. So this is what we have. We see that this is also a very strong growth market segment. And that's good. Then we look at industrial applications. There, the data situation is a complete disaster. This is an attempt we have made 2 years ago. We will do another one for 2021. But you see that here we have 18,000 units. I don't know, that's probably too little, but we couldn't find enough contributors to provide data to the statistics. And the reason why this is the case is that we have a significant naming problem. Everybody has chillers. The chiller is a heat pump. Every chiller produces thermal waste. And I think we really need to address it like that. If you're going to a hotel, you produce thermal waste because you benefit from the cooling. And normally, nobody makes any effort to use the waste heat from the cooling process as input for the hot water generation in the hotel or in the office building or in the sports complex. And that is really something where I think that is the lowest hanging fruit we could get if we bring manufacturers, if you bring policymakers to the point to say, let's make an ordinance that you need a permit to put an air handling unit, a dry cooler or a water cooler out on the roof. If you cannot prove that you have no use for that energy, then you can do it. But if you have hot water needs in the same building, then you must connect. And that is really something, it is legally speaking, from a policy perspective, not an easy task. But from a technical perspective, this only happens because the cooling guys don't speak to the heating guys. And I'm still flabbergasted by the situation in the US that everybody has an air conditioning unit and then you have hot water from gas. I mean, how does that make sense? You're wasting the energy, you're heating up the cities and everybody else, of course, also. And it doesn't occur to the people that there is a connection to be made, and that would actually be an energy efficiency booster. I had this discussion with the Indians. The Indians said, we don't need heat pumps, go away. I said to them, okay, but if you need cooling, you get the heat for free. Then they're like, oh, heat for free, that sounds good, let's discuss. And that was the entrance point for this debate. Are we doing enough? No. Here you can see what Europe has done. The yellow curve, the yellow area is the total final energy demand used for heating. And the white curve with the green dots is the energy demand provided by heat pumps. And you see that we are in, I put in this small flag here, first RES directive, that is for all those in acronym lingo in Brussels. The first renewable energy sources directive was passed in 2009. That had the idea to push for more heat pump deployment and for more deployment of renewable energy in the marketplace. That was the sole purpose of this directive. It's basically, the full text is in the directive on the marketing of more renewable energy sources. You could say it's a failure because in 10 years, it managed to bring 4.2 percentage points additional growth from 15.31 to 19.71. Of course, the policymakers will tell you, yeah, but we achieved our target because that was 20% in 2020. So we were actually early. Indeed, that's true. But it was not impacting the market as much as it could have. And also now we are discussing that in the current discussion, in the current revision, the second revision, which is again under revision now as we speak, and I will show you what that means now. We are discussing an annual increase of 1.3 percentage points. And you can see here that we are so far away from that growth. Now the member states of Europe, and that makes me then always a bit disappointed, they didn't agree to have a mandatory target for themselves. So the targets are only mandatory on the European level, and then we can hope that the member states do some shifting and some haggling around, and one helps the other. Sweden, for example, is more advanced than France or than Italy or than Spain. And so if one country overfulfills, they can provide, or in a calculation approach, they can then give the overcompensation to the others. But by and large, we are not at all on the level that we would need. And we will see in a minute that the current targets are even more ambitious. So what's happening next? This is all status quo, right? So that's what we have done in the past. I will not bore you with all the pieces of legislation that are covering heat pumps. It's Energy Efficiency Directive, EPBD, the Renewables Directive, energy taxation. That we have a climate law on CO2 emissions. We're discussing now an ETS, an emission trading scheme for buildings. That's all happening. But what we do have, and to simplify it, we have a Green Deal and we have a climate law that is ongoing. So this is built on an EU strategy for energy systems integration, and it's built on a renovation wave communication. Both things interlink quite nicely, and I will show you separate slides on that. And then we have a Fit for 55 package that consists of 15 initiatives, which we can say, if implemented properly, will all lead to more heat pumps. So that's all you need to know. It's a very heavily legislated market area, but it will lead to more heat pumps if properly implemented. The first one, Energy Systems Integration Strategy, came out in 2019, said, and this was the total game changer. The Commission for the first time said, okay, what we think what should happen is 40% of all buildings residential and 65% of all commercial buildings should be electrified. And since energy efficiency first as a principle prevails, that means heat pumps, because of course you can use the Joule effect, but the Joule effect will not bring you where you need to go in terms of energy efficiency. If we apply this to 115 to 120 million buildings, it means that we need to have around 49 to 52 million heat pumps by 2030. I forgot that. Okay, so by 2030, and that means factor four from 2019, and of course that was unprecedented, and it doesn't match what we have seen beforehand. Then it also mentioned industrial applications, but it didn't give any precise numbers. So we know that we have industrial energy demand of around 2,000 terawatt hours, 2,100 terawatt hours per year in Europe, and 10% of that can go in heat pumps, so about 200, we think. Then the renovation wave, and the most important thing here is, forget all the text here, the red line is the only one that is really relevant. If the renovation wave was to be executed, one of the main targets was renovate the 35 million least performing buildings. If you remember, 115 to 120 million units. So about a quarter needs to be renovated. And that is great, because that's the quarter that is not immediately fit for heat pump deployment. So if we can build the heat pumps into the new buildings, and those that are old but still fit for purpose because they have over-dimensioned radiators, or they are quite good as a building envelope, then the renovation wave would close the gap so that we can then say 100% of all buildings are fit for heat pump deployment. Then we have the people have asked us, so what do you think? And we have looked at this. We said, okay, heat pumps are a no-brainer in all new buildings. There is about 40% of the buildings where we can say the boiler exchange will be possible with little to no renovation. Maybe you replace a few radiators, maybe you make them a bit bigger, maybe you seal the windows, maybe you build in a new door. So small things, not deep renovation. Then we go, so then that's about 40%. Then another 40% we would say is not fit for purpose immediately, unless you say, but we can also use hybrid heat pumps. So if I connect, and that's, you will hear in the Netherlands example, the Netherlands, the Dutch government is really betting heavily on hybrid heat pumps, and they say, okay, if we do that, then we can put heat pumps everywhere, because if it's cold in winter and the heat pump, the refrigeration cycle will not do the job, then you switch on the gas boiler and you do it. Very important to avoid greenwashing on that point. We need requirements that make the minimum efficiency requirements on hybrid heat pumps high. So currently we have in the first stage in Europe 110% in terms of primary energy efficiency. This has to go to 125% or beyond, because then it will mean that 85% of the energy comes from the heat pump, from the refrigeration cycle, and 15% comes from gas. The open question, not answered at all, is what will a gas grid supplier do when you significantly reduce demand and you reduce it by 80%? Will they still operate their gas grid? Dutch government thinks yes. I'm an economist. I'd say, if it was my company, I would look for a different business model. But maybe that's also good, because if the gas grid operators understand that they could actually become providers of heating technology or heat as a service, then we would move such a huge leap ahead. but they are not there yet. So that's something that we are discussing. I think I need to go faster. I'm sorry. So here are some great examples that heat pumps work in renovation. An unrenovated heritage building in the UK somewhere. You know that the UK is notorious for its absolutely insufficient building stock. So if you can put heat pumps into the UK building, you can put them everywhere. And then we would also say we have the biggest heat market penetration in the Scandinavian countries. If they work there, again, you can put them everywhere. Then an increasing market will lead to increasing attractiveness for new players. You probably have heard that Elon Musk has talked about the heat pump as its pet child at one of the battery events in 2019, I think it was. Unfortunately, he's too busy buying Twitter and sending rockets to space to nurture his pet child a bit more. But also other players are coming into the game and looking at fully electrified buildings. I'm actually going to the fully charged show in the United Kingdom over the weekend, where we will talk about what is the next boiler. And this is a great show. I enjoy a lot on YouTube. Robert Llewellyn and Dan Caesar talking about all these things, technology. So we think that there is a lot of things that are going to happen. Now, this is again a bit of the past. What's happening today? Today is the day where the ENVI committee in the European Parliament has agreed to 45% energy efficiency increase. I put a star next to it because it still has to go through the plenary vote in the European Parliament, the same as the 45% renewables target. If both of these happen, it will again mean you can only achieve these targets if you push for more heat pumps. We have already a 55% CO2 emission reduction target, all of this by 2030, and that is binding already. There's a climate law behind it. So it's actually legally binding. This is going to be quite fun for the lawyers because we can hold countries accountable if they don't deliver. Then what is happening in Russia? We have unfortunately, we used to have a climate crisis. Now we have a global pandemic that is still with us, and we have Russia that attacks Ukraine. And all of this is deplorable, but all of this is actually helping to put the attention on how to get rid of fossil fuels. Some people say, let's get rid of Russian gas only. The IEA presented a 10-point plan to reduce the European Union's reliance on Russian gas. I think it's a bit misleading because this is for the world, right? And it's not Russian gas, it's fossil gas that should be done here. Anyways, point 7 and point 8, recognize heat pumps both in residential buildings, but also in industrial applications. So here we are now on the top level. Fatih Birol has mentioned heat pumps. That's always, when I started this, that was one of the goals, right? I would always tweet and send to my board, look, this and that person has mentioned heat pumps. That was so rare. And now you have it every day in the news. It's really a completely different time. And the European Commission has published Repower EU, Joint European Action for More Affordable, Secure and Sustainable Energy. And this has 2 milestones that are set. Arrive at sales of 10 million additional hydronic heat pumps in 2026, and then do not stop there, but go to 30 million hydronic heat pumps by 2030. Of course, air-to-air heat pumps will also be sold, and that means that all in all, this, if you apply the same growth rate, which is maybe a bit optimistic on my side, but nonetheless, then we would have more than 50 million, actually more to the level of 70 million of heat pumps in 2030. And that would mean that our vision, which you will see on the last slide, is absolutely fulfilled. So we're discussing here 5 times annual sales until 2030, average growth of 20%. I know that humans do not like to understand exponential growth, and it seems simple, right? Because it's 20% every year. Yeah, but 20% is exponential growth. And in 2026, 2027, that means 1 million additional units per year. So it's really a challenge that we are addressing. And that is also what it really changes the way the EHPA is working. We have been, you could say, a marketing organization. We have talked about what people should understand when it comes to heat pumps. Now we're talking about what governments need to do to nurture the heat pump market. The industry is very optimistic. They say we can do this. Here we have made a small assessment of what that would mean. If I built it on the 2021 numbers, 2.1 million, and then I want to arrive at an additional 30 million in 2030, then this is the growth curve. If you know that the total market in Europe is at the moment around 7 to 8 million, then you see also that this is a bit too much on the optimistic and rosy side. But for sure, what it means is that the total market will move to heat pumps and the value chain will move to heat pump. There is always some pockets that will be done by other technologies. I don't care for 100%. Let it be 75%, but it will be significantly different than it is today. And that's something that we are really pushing forward. So we can say that as a result of all this legislation, there is not a lack of demand. The question then is, can industry deliver? And we have a manufacturing landscape of today of 170 factories. So I dare say that there is enough capacity. It's providing jobs, it's providing export potential, it's providing perspective also to local communities, because for some very strange reason, many of these manufacturing plants are at the end of the road, in the middle of the forest, in fact. So it's important, but I would say, and we have asked our industry members, can you deliver? And they said yes. You see Kiev, I see Kiev here on this map. I think it's also something that we need to discuss a bit further when this war progresses, hopefully in the direction that at least I would like it to end in a positive way for the Ukraine. Then how do we rebuild Ukraine? And could Ukraine be an example for a green building, green energy system and a green building sector? And we're discussing at the moment already with the Ukrainian HVAC association what we can do to help them there. On a side note, component manufacturers are really important, and they are also drivers of innovation, and they are at the moment also they are limiting the market development, because maybe there's not enough heat exchangers, compressors, controllers, and fans. You have all heard about semiconductor shortage, and that's what we can see today, that is really happening and limits the development of the markets. They say they can triple to quadruple today's capacity, but they really have to have ambition on the back end. We need to tell CEOs that this is a change that will not go away, and you are safe in building a new factory, because also the future will be heat pumps. We are looking at a number of requests that we have created, similar to what you presented, Panama. And I think I'm very happy to see that you have chosen a different order, but we're pretty much aligned on this. We started by communication, because we said that nobody wants to make a mistake. So the policymakers, our top level guys, the commissioner for heat pumps, that would, yeah, let's have that. No, the commissioner for energy and the commissioner for the energy transition, they should speak openly to CEOs and say, this is going to stay. We will move away from gas in heating, and it is safe for you to redevelop your production lines into heat pump production lines or hybrid systems in the beginning. There is actually also a US EU dialogue on clean technologies that I had the pleasure to attend a meeting on Monday, and I think there is going to be some further development. It's not so clear what can be done, but it's for sure that both parties want to cooperate, and that is very high level. It's done by Mr. Biden and Ms. von der Leyen. On the US side is a person called Melanie Nagagawa. She's a special advisor to the president. On our side, it's the Director General, Ditte Juul Jurgensen, who is running the show. Then we think it's important to make clean heating economically most attractive. There's going to be a campaign forthcoming on that topic that we are preparing as we speak, because we think that we need a continuous demand that has to be driven by the marketplace. If it makes economic sense, people will invest, installers will educate themselves, people will take a career in engineering, in installation, and so on, and companies will build factories. So that cannot be done. We are not communists here. We want to have a market-based economy that draws innovation forward in the clean heating and sector integration also, because there is going to be a huge marketplace for integrated solution for the voltaic on your roof. The roof becomes the power plant, the basement becomes the heating and cooling booster, and the building becomes active nodes in the electric grid. So I think if we make it 1, 2, 3, it's as easy as that. In legislation, I have said already that we are very well set up, but we do need a continuity. We need a priority for heat pumps, especially the F-gas debate is something where we see a clash between energy legislation and the refrigerant legislation, and that needs to be solved. That's something we are discussing at the moment, but really, again, from a market development perspective. So we tell the Commission, hey, if you want to achieve these targets, then you cannot have an F-gas regulation proposed or a REACH regulation proposed as you have it done now, because it will limit the potential. So you have to choose. In the end, the industry will make less money, but the bloc, the European Union, will not meet its targets. So that's really where we are at the moment, and that's something that is not easy. Skills, I mentioned, is really a big thing. Do we have the capacity and level of skilled experts? And that is not only installers, it's also planners, architects, engineers, entrepreneurs. If the architect doesn't understand the heat pump, he will not put it into the planning process. Then you have a building that is not fit for purpose, and that you will be regret because it's a stranded asset. And of course, there is even a small part of R&D. But I really want to stress that we are talking about social innovation, process innovation, policy innovation, much more than technology innovation in Europe. We have the technology pretty much that is there. We will have incremental improvements. We will have better integrated solutions. They will be smarter, they will be smaller, easier to install. I had a question yesterday of a lady saying, "Oh, I've heard that heat pumps are so heavy. Can women be in the industry?" I mean, I know some quite strong women in both senses of the word that can handle that. But of course, also modular designs will make it easier for everybody to take care of their own physical strengths. This is only for your information. Other requirements that apply to the European legislation, so I will not bore you with that. I like this picture. we mentioned the strong women that we need. We need a strong workforce. We need an all hands on deck approach that brings heat pumps forward. And sometimes it's only the decision in favor of a heat pump, and that is often taken by the woman in the house. So maybe this muscle here is also the decision-making muscle inside a decision-making process. In Europe, we think we need a heat pump accelerator. We need to bring all the players to the table. We need to coordinate the different actors so that they are really working in the same direction. And we need a sounding board for legislation so that the policymakers understand what they can and what they should not do. And with that, I'm pretty much done. Last thing, I'm a big fan of Apple products. So one more thing here. We are hearing that the heat pumps will bring the electric grids to failure. That is a rubbish, non-argument. We talked to the European DSOs, the distribution system operators, and to some of the major utilities. And we asked them, what do you think about that? Because you're the experts. And they answered very clearly, the lights will stay on with 50 million heat pumps. We had a policy seminar on that topic. You can watch it on our website. But the point is very clear. Electric grids have developed dynamically in the past, and they will do that also in the future. But we have to tell them now, because it will take 10 years. Luckily, we do not have that many heat pumps in the grid today to kill it. Plus also, there's electric mobility coming, and the demand of a Tesla 100D is the same demand of 4 heat pumps. So then if the grid will cater to the Teslas of this world and to the Volkswagens and to the BYDs, then it can also deliver 2 heat pumps. And I tend to think that we eat the breadcrumbs of the table of electric mobility. Last slide then, we have 163 members. We are really cooperating a lot with other bodies. I should add the Building Decarbonization Coalition here. We're talking to the Chinese Association, to the IEA, to the Heat Pump Center, to IRENA, to the Heat Pump Center of Japan, etc. I think it will be a global market. It will be a global value chain, and we should learn from each other. I'm happy to have been able to give a bit of insight from Europe, and I hope it was helpful. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Thomas. Thank you very much. It's so encouraging to hear about the growth and the initiatives that you have underway. And that you're farther along the myth busting trend line than we are on some of the myths over here in the United States. We had a really robust chat. And I welcome everybody. If you have questions for Thomas, please do put them in the chat, and I'll start asking Thomas some of them right now. Thomas, there was quite a bit of discussion about the hybrid or the dual fuel heat pumps. And that is a technology that a number of manufacturers and gas utilities are working on over here in the United States. Could you talk more about some of the considerations and how you balance within the association the recognition of really needing to get off of natural gas in a timely manner, but also working with members that really see dual fuel as a transition strategy, and how do you balance that, and what are some of your additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was it's a relevant point. We had quite some debate about it, and we annoyed some of our members that wanted to push that forward separately, because we said we will not do that. We are the Heat Pump Association. We promote all types of heat pumps, including hybrids. Anyways, any normal electric heat pump is a hybrid. It's just a mono-energetic hybrid, because most of the devices that are sold in Europe have a Joule effect heater in the storage tank. And so, but that is really my personal opinion. So it's not to be mistaken for an association opinion. I personally think that if you have a fully electrified house, it is easier. And maybe the ease, and I stressed before that the ease of installation plays an important role. So for those buildings where you can't do that, where the grid doesn't hold, we had the discussion in Italy, for example, that in some areas of Italy, the grid was not strong enough to uphold additional demand in wintertime. You may see, if you're in Minnesota somewhere where it's -15, -20 degrees and the capacity goes down. I mean, we try to be as fact-based as possible. So I would not tell anybody that you can simply put the heat pump in and then it doesn't matter, and you go -25 degrees and it will have the same capacity. That's rubbish. So let's be really honest about that. Where the grid falls, if it's getting too cold and you still need your 20, 30, I can't translate into BTU, but if in kilowatt hours, so if you need your 20, 30 kilowatts of capacity and you need it 2,000 hours a year, then the majority of that will be when it's cold. If it's cold in your area at -20, -25 degrees Celsius, then this is going to be a stressful situation for the grid. So maybe it makes absolute sense to say, for those cold days, but in Europe, we know this is about 1 month maximum, maybe more 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you have the gas connection. And it's a fair game. It's also fair to say then, if we can't renovate the buildings and we don't want to do that, okay, let's keep the gas, but be aware that this gas will become more expensive. Because as I said, the operating costs of the grid will have to be spread across fewer hours. And my thought experiment would be, if you tell a grid operator you have 100 houses and you switch off 80 of them, will you still operate your grid? And most of the time they will say no. But if you say, I replace all these gas boilers with a hybrid system with an 80% coverage of heat pumps, then you will do the same. So does that make sense? And that's something, in all honesty, we have to answer. If we say, fine, we can't do anything, and this makes economically more sense than renovating the buildings, be it. But you know, what I would like to see is that we're not trying to put ourselves in a situation where we simply pretend that there is this pipe dream of a solution, but in the end it will come out costly. And that, because that will create social unrest, and that's what we don't want. So what I could imagine is that you say, in all honesty, we have that, we do not want to renovate, then this is fine. Or you say it's a two-staged approach. For the moment, we accept that the gas may become more expensive, but we have a renovation pathway, a renovation pathway where we say, in 5 years, in 10 years, when we have money again, we will do the renovation, and then we switch the gas part off. And that will be possible, because if you replace the windows, if you put roof insulation in, you put a new door in, then you will reduce the energy demand of the building by 15 to 20%, which is then exactly what the hybrid system is producing today. Reality is, in Europe, the product is only selling if markets subsidize it. In Italy, it's a huge increase, but the Italian government, in the super bonus scheme, includes hybrid systems. And so then it makes economic sense, it will be sold.
That's a good segue to the next question, Thomas, where there's questions about how are heat pumps subsidized in Europe. Is it generally done through governments, or is it done through utilities or some other entity? And then in your new initiative, there's 2 questions coming up. I'll ask the first one. Your new initiative about making heat pumps the economically beneficial choice. How do you view that the future of incentive programs need to look, and subsidy programs need to look, in order to be able to have them best lead to heat pump installation? Yeah.
First question, the subsidies are pretty much done on behalf of governments, not necessarily, I mean, there's always an agency. In Germany, for example, it's a bank. In France, it's done via the tax authority. But so a government decides that there should be a subsidy. It's a government-based decision. It's rarely that the utility is doing it or that an aggregator is doing it. That's what we hope for to come as new business models. renting a heat pump, getting heat as a service, but that's not there yet. Mainly because flexibility is not given a proper value. I would love to learn about how that is done in the UK, in the US, because I'm hearing that this flexibility, load shifting, load shedding is much more developed in the US than it is in Europe. So mostly governments, we tend to move to a position where we say probably the least well-off households will have to be subsidized completely. There is an example now in Ireland. Ireland has a very ambitious plan. They have put up 8 billion euros until 2030 for their building decarbonization, and they have a plan for 400 installations per month that should be completely free of charge to the end user. So this is mainly social housing corporations and poor households. And that is important because it avoids mixing energy policy with social policy. We hear it too often that somebody says, what about the poor households that can't afford the heat pump? Most of the time, the poor households that can't afford the heat pump have also quite shitty housing. If you're, so they are not living in a comfortable situation. If you put another technology into their house, they will still have uncomfortable housing. So we should say, if it's too expensive to do it, then social policy should take over, but there is 80% or 70% of the population that can afford the change, and that should be encouraged. Not everybody needs money. A lot of people need a simplified process. So if subsidies would include on my side always consulting bodies, energy agencies, or in Ireland, they call it one-stop shop. It's called Super Homes Island, and it's now they called it, I think it's called super electrified homes, because they realize that you want photovoltaic, a charger, the heat pump, and maybe a battery. So that's why we see there's a swing, and luckily it is more and more accepted that the poorest part of the population needs to be subsidized, and needs to be subsidized to nearly 100%. In France, we have the coup de puce that was a heat pump for €1. In Germany, it is moving. There is a subsidy for if you replace an oil boiler with a heat pump, 45% of the investment costs. Gas boiler versus heat pumps, 35% of the investment costs. So the significant amounts of money are flowing into that part. What we are not subsidizing yet, and that is something that could be interesting to consider, is installer education. I think we should do something like if an existing installer takes apprentices on board, maybe they should be subsidized for the first 6 months to teach these people how to do the installations. Or if an installer proves that they have never installed heat pumps, they get a subsidy for the 1st, the 5th, the 10th, the 15th, and so on, so that it becomes attractive and creates habit for those people in the market that have not been heat pump installers to get used to doing that.
Wonderful. Great suggestions. There's a question here, Thomas, about which European countries have the highest potential for accelerated heat pump penetration over the next 2 to 5 years? And how should one think about prioritizing between working in different countries for the greatest impact?
I think probably one of the biggest growth rates we will see in Germany now, because it's a complete conversion from being very heat pump unfriendly, and I could talk a long time about that, to having all the right measures in place. And this is now, the subsidy scheme is in place. There is a CO2 price established, and from 1st of July, or 1st of June or 1st of July, sorry for that inaccuracy, but any of these two, the levies will be deleted from electricity if it's used for heating. So the electricity price will drop, while the gas price, on top of everything else, will increase further because the CO2 price increases by €5 per ton until 2025. So then Poland should not be underestimated. Poland has a great workforce, is really moving fast, and has done something in the direction of electrified buildings, photovoltaic plus heat pumps, that is very successful. The Netherlands, you will hear in 2 weeks' time, so we'll not talk much about that, but is probably that's the litmus test. If the Netherlands can do it, then everybody else can do it, because they are like drug addicts on gas. If they can move away from gas, then everybody else can do it. And the UK is about likewise. So I think these countries are really strong. Where maybe we don't see it so openly, but the potential is even bigger, would be around the Mediterranean, when you can use heating and cooling at the same time. But we're lacking the product. So that if you think it would be openly and clear and obvious that somebody that needs cooling all the time uses the waste heat from cooling for hot water generation. If you would have an air conditioning unit and you connect one of the heat exchangers to a hot water tank, that's not happening. And that is a bit of a pity, my personal regret, because I think that's the biggest advantage of this technology, and it should be used in this direction.
Wonderful, thank you. You have so many questions coming in. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. I'll try to combine a couple of them. Is there any area of Europe looking at an all-in divesting from the gas distribution system? Basically looking at, they're putting plans in place to completely eliminate the gas system. And then I'll combine that with, does Russia's recent cutting off of Poland and Bulgaria's gas supply from Russia, will that affect your strategy at all around heat pumps, either at the association or do you think across the EU?
Question number one, probably the Netherlands most likely, but I would also add Germany, because Germany has now introduced a requirement that in all boiler replacements, not only new buildings, you have to provide the new system with 65% of renewable energy. And in all reality, that can only be done with minimum a hybrid heat pump. So this is the first step to moving to phasing out gas. But the Netherlands probably much stronger because they have dedicated areas for disconnection of gas. And that's happening as we speak. Denmark has made the statement that they will move completely out. They will replace wherever possible the existing gas boiler with a district heating connection. They will evaluate who can be connected to a district heating system, and where that is not the case, they will put heat pumps in. So that was not foreseeable 3 years ago. They have really made also a complete turnaround. I don't know. I haven't talked to my Polish colleagues on the cutting of gas situation. At the moment, they would just be supplied with from the other end, so via Germany. And it seems that this is not a problem for the summer. I would assume that the end users will actually change their perspective. If I can give you the example, my father is 82 years old, so you can say that, okay, he's biased because he knows you. And I have told him to get a heat pump, but I had him on the phone this morning and it's really expensive. It will cost him 22,000 euros, but he said, I really want to do that because it feels better. And that is a trigger where I would say if somebody that is 82 years old, where the person he has to understand, and of course he knows, he's not stupid, that this is not for his lifetime, right? He cannot imagine that he will, or maybe he will, but if he has another 25 years, the lifetime of the heat pump, he will be 107. So most likely he will die before the heat pump breaks down, or even with 20 years. And still he wants to do it. And I think this is what makes me optimistic, that people say, we want to change. We want that now. It's not a government introduced measure, but it's something that the people want because they feel better.
Wonderful, thank you. And the recent shutting down of Poland and Bulgaria's Russian gas supplies, do you think that's going to affect the strategy at all, accelerate it or change it in any way?
Yeah, we will see. The Repower EU addresses exactly that it wants to get Europe completely off these 155 BCM of Russian gas that we are getting, and of course replace it with some LPG from the US and other sources. Well, this strategy is in the making. For ourselves, for the Heat Pump Association, it doesn't affect our strategy because we have said it many times, the truth on heat pumps has not changed as a result of this war. The other two catastrophes that we have beforehand and climate change in the first place have been much more influential. So what we can use the momentum, and we get more open ears for our suggestions, but we see also that these suggestions that we have proposed are not they are quite difficult to implement, especially when you want results before this winter. That is not so easy. So we will continue to do what we are doing. We now moved, as I said, we changed our strategy before this war started, and said already that we see that there is more need for industrialization strategy, and we need markets to grow, and we need to look at what makes market grow, and that's what we are doing. We have really intensified our cooperation with DG Grow, the industry and directorate, and Commissioner Breton and his cabinet In the past, we have talked more with DG Energy. So it was more about the recognition of the benefits of heat pumps towards the energy and climate targets, DG Klima likewise, so the General Directorate for Climate Action. And now we said we have to change that. We have to move more into the direction of industrial development, of skills development, of R&D support. So but it's not, it's really, this decision was taken before the war. We have reshaped our arguments in the context of Repower EU to say, what can we do now? Because also heat pumps have been mentioned for the first time in an official communication by the European Commission on a high level. So as basically saying, if we want to get rid of Russian gas, we have to put more photovoltaic, more windmills, and more heat pumps into the game. And that is quite a first for us.
Thank you for that, Thomas. We have time for one more question. And it relates to your plans around a marketing campaign on heat pumps. And so question is, could you tell us more about this campaign and what you have planning? What are the core messages of it and what resonates really well with the European audience?
Yeah, I wish I could, but we are really just starting. It's I sent out the invitation for the kickoff meeting today. So we have handed this over to a third party, to an advocacy company, and we are doing it not alone. We're doing it together with the European Copper Institute and with the European Climate Foundation and with Solar Power Europe, because we really want to stress that this joint action between photovoltaic, heat pumps, and electrified building and affordable also and easy to do is important. And it's more or less a background campaign to say, should not everybody have the right to participate in the energy transition? And that's not the case today, because if the most polluting solution is the cheapest, then you put the burden on end users. And what we want to achieve with this campaign is to tell governments, wouldn't it be an honorable cause if you would make the cleanest solutions? It doesn't have to be heat pumps only, but it can be other things, but it will also be heat pumps. If this is the most affordable, so that an end user doesn't have to decide whether they want to have a new kitchen or a new heating system. It will make sense for them to have the new heating system, and they will be aligned with the energy and climate targets. And that should be the way we build this, because no government on this planet has enough money to pay for the energy transition from tax money.
Thomas, I think I'm not alone, judging by the chat, that people very much enjoyed the opportunity to spend an hour with you. Thank you so much for your remarks, but more importantly, thank you so much for your leadership and the model that you provide, not only in Europe, but really around the world on advancing heat pump technology. So thank you for joining us. Everybody in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. I put the link to the European Heat Pump Association's website in the chat. So if questions did not get answered, please do feel free to reach out to Thomas and his team through that. But thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks about GeoGrid heat pumps and the transition over to GeoGrids. Thank you all. Good luck decarbonizing out there, everybody.
Great. Thanks a lot for having me. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye, Thomas.
Bye.